What is up, you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another video. Today, I'm doing a book review for Elantris, written by Brandon Sanderson. So without further ado, let's dig into it. So if you guys have read anything by Brandon Sanderson, for the most part, then you probably know about his Cosmere. And this is only the second book in his Cosmere universe that I've read. This is technically his third book that he wrote, or was written, that I've read. I read Legion, or The Many Lives of Stephen Leeds, and then Tress the Emerald Sea, and now Elantris. This is also his first book that got published. I think he's been on record multiple times saying that Elantris was like book 6 or 7 that he actually wrote. This is the first one he actually had published. And I think it was originally published back in 2005, so almost 20 years ago now. And he even admits himself that Elantris doesn't age the best, or rather, he's just gotten much better as a writer. Like, it kind of shows its age if you read some of his newer stuff within the last few years, and then go back to Elantris, and are expecting very high quality Brandon Sanderson. Like, this is still very good, Brandon Sanderson, but it's just not his best for sure. So, with that being said, I did enjoy Elantris. I had higher expectations than I eventually got, if that makes sense. So it underperformed, for my opinion, a little bit. But anyway, for those of you who don't know what Elantris is or haven't read it, so yeah, it follows 3 characters. The first is Raoden, who is the Crown Prince of the Arelon, the Arelon Kingdom, which borders the city of Elantris. And then it has Hrathen, who is that guy. He's basically like a red priest in armor all the time. I forget the actual name of the religion. And then you have Sarene, who is a princess from a neighboring country who came to wed Raoden to kind of have that marital bond between nations. But things get thrown amok very quickly because there is 10 years ago from the modern day of the storytelling, the city of Elantris had Elantrians or Elantrians. In my head, I always say Elantians, just because the words are so similar, but I know it's not. It's not the lost city of Atlantis. But anyway, they had like a lot of really cool magics, basically immortal, for lack of a better word. And Elantris was like untouchable. It was like the utopia. A lot of the like peasants or like just the normal common Joe saw Elantris as like the city of gods. And then 10 years ago, like the Raod, I think is how it said, occurred, which is like a turning point where the blessing to be an Elantrian turned into a curse because the magic changed and they basically became these undead creatures. And then there were riots. And I'm not really spoiling much because this is all explained in the first like 30, 40 pages. And yeah, so then country's kind of thrown in chaos. They don't have this magic to rely on. And then this new weird form of government where merchants are kings instead of like royalty. I don't know. It's kind of cool, kind of weird, kind of different. And yeah, that's kind of the groundwork for Elantris. So my overall thoughts on Elantris, my overall score is a 6.44 out of 10, which, like I said, isn't amazing. It did underperform my expectations a little bit, but I still did enjoy my time with it. There were sections, I was like maybe 200 pages in. How long is this book? If you include the deleted seeds, everything, it's over 500 pages. But if you don't do that, no, it's still over 500. It's about 550. Yeah, just over 550 pages. So for the first 200, I was kind of bored a lot of times. Because like I said, you have those 3 POV characters, and a lot of times it would focus on Sarene, who was definitely like the most politically motivated out of the 3, and she had like the longest chapters, and she was the character I was least invested in. So that just by default kind of takes me out of it a little bit. And then every time we saw Raoden, I was excited because things were actually happening, like cool magic things, like cool world building bits. I mean, even with Hrathen, he had a lot of good world building bits. but then there was only a couple pages sometimes for those chapters, and then sometimes it was like a 10 or 15 page chapter with Sarene. So it was almost like a slog to get through Sarene sometimes to get to the other two guys that I was more interested in. And even, like I said, even Hrathen sometimes was a politically motivated character as well. So even some of his stuff I got bored with. So there's just kind of this back and forth. And then after those first 200 pages, it picked up a little bit, but still, it was like Sarene was like the main front runner for page time. I haven't actually looked and see who gets the most page space, but it definitely felt like Sarene. Even if that's not the case, it definitely felt like it as a reader. So yeah, that's where I'm going to stop for spoiler free. So if you haven't read Elantris and you don't want any spoilers, I would recommend clicking off now. But if you have read Elantris and want to take this journey with me, or you don't care about spoilers, first of all, you're a monster if you don't care about spoilers. But if you don't, let's keep digging into Elantris. So for those of you who don't know, I break down my ratings from 5 categories. So I rate each category out of 10, and then I take the average out of those 5 to get my total score of that 6.44. So the first category I like to rate is emotional impact. And I rated emotional impact as a 6.5. And the reason it's not higher, again, is because there were a lot of sections where I just was bored and I really didn't care. It did pick up towards the end. I definitely kind of felt that Sanderlanche a little bit, where a lot of the pieces were starting to click together that he kind of set up throughout the story. And where it was like the last, because every chapter up to that point was like one person's POV. And then the next chapter was someone else's POV. The following chapter was someone else's POV. But it was basically predominantly was those 3 characters that I previously mentioned. And then in the last chapter, it's like each paragraph almost, or every couple of paragraphs, is a different POV. And it's jumping around to the city of Elantris or jumping around the different countries even. When a couple of the characters get transported to a different section of the country or different country entirely. So that at the end, I definitely kind of felt that Sanderlanche because like things were happening very quickly. And like I said, a lot of those previous little story bits kind of were starting to click together. Like Sarene's whole thing with fencing with the fellow ladies of the court, and then like the Rayo people are getting surrounded by the enemy soldiers. They're gonna get slaughtered, and then just someone starts to attack the guards back, and then the ladies pick up whatever they can get their hands on and start using their fencing practice to kind of fight back. So little bits like that were kind of satisfying, but not satisfying enough. But the reason it's not lower, with that being said, is because when Raoden was on the page with his fellow Elantrians and him pulling them out of the Rayod, or like their stupor, basically lifting their emotions up and giving them a purpose. Like I love that kind of stuff. And I really like, I'm weird sometimes, and I really like real-time strategy games, like computer games, where you kind of like build up a base, and you kind of expand and like collecting these resources. And I kind of got that feeling when we were watching or when we were reading Raoden, kind of getting these supplies off of Sarene, and making the best of the situation in a pretty crappy area, and like lifting people's spirits and like giving them a reason again to live and to fight back and all these things, right? So I really liked when Raoden was on the page. I don't really feel like there was a bad page when he was on there. So that's what raised it up a decent amount. But again, the other parts weren't enough for me to like actively dislike the book, if that makes sense. It just kind of made me roll my eyes occasionally when Sarene was on the page, for 10, 15 pages at a time. And I'm like, all right, when can we get back to the interesting stuff? So yeah, emotional impact 6.5. And then next, I like to rate characters, and I rated characters as a solid 6 out of 10. Now, like I said, it's a little lower than emotional impact, and that's because there's a lot of characters I just didn't care for. Even though there were some characters I did really enjoy. Like I keep saying, Raoden was really solid. And then a lot of the people he pulled around him, like Galladon, he was probably my favorite like sub character or like secondary character. And then Karada too, who was like one of the warlords, I guess you could say, in Elantris before Raoden came in and kind of pulled them all under his wing. She was a really interesting character, and just when she had to sacrifice herself at the end, that really hurt, especially when it's like if another 30 seconds would have passed and then all the Elantrians like came to their full power after Raoden like figured out the thing and made the magic work again, she would have been alive. That just hurts a little bit more. And then I forget the soldier's name. I think it was like Saolin, something like that. He was also a really solid character. Again, he was like a secondary, even tertiary character, I would say. But he was one of the first that came and like trusted Raoden. And again, his sacrifice hurt a lot too when that happened. But there are just a lot of characters that were either like subpar or I just actively kind of disliked. And Sarene is kind of on top of that list. There were scenes where she shined. There were scenes I just am like, why are we still here with her? Why are we still in the court? Why are we doing these things? So she was one I was really wishy-washy on, but I would say I'd probably lean towards dislike. And then Hrathen, I was even more wishy-washy on him, but I would probably lean more towards liking for him, especially towards the end when he sacrificed himself. Again, all those good things. But then, like, all of the priests under Hrathen and, like, his Ovid or Odiv, I forget that priest's name, but he's just a freaking nut job. And you could kind of tell that he was, like, a bigger villain than Hrathen was. And then when that when that reveal finally happened, when, oh no, Hrathen isn't higher ranked than his Odiv like he thought. And it turns out he's a nut job, and he's just like, I'm just going to slaughter everybody. We're doing it for the good of our god. Again, I didn't like him, but then after that reveal, I really liked that character as well. And I'm blanking on the name, I'm sorry. Yeah, and then there were just a lot of members of the court that were kind of surrounding Sarene that I didn't really care for. Like her uncle was interesting, but he wasn't really that big of a player. And her cousins were kind of whatever. And that one, I forget his name, I think Aiden, one of her cousins that later is revealed is really an Elantrian, but his family like protected him and put makeup on him. I feel like that was a weird reveal. Like that was his whole thing. Like his entire character was to be on the back burner, kind of in the back of your head. It's like, okay, he's there. And then it's like, oh, he's really good with steps. I know how many steps it is between here and there. That was weird. Kind of like, I think like Brandon, I'll get a little later when I talk about world building, but he kind of like made this magic system where if you want to transport, you have to know exactly where you're going and how far it is, or else it won't work and you could be way far off and it could be really dangerous. So with that being said, he has this entire character's arc being, I'm really good with numbers. I know how many steps it is here between here and there. I've been there one time when I was 3. I remember that. That to me is really weird and was kind of a far stretch, and made my eyes roll pretty heavy. But again, that's not the character's fault. That's Brandon writing the character's fault. But again, that's Aiden. I didn't really care for him. Like he seemed like he was hiding. Like when he was first revealed, and he's like when they're at dinner, and he's like, oh, just over there muttering numbers. Like, okay, that's really weird. But you kind of know it could potentially be a bigger thing. What secrets are the family hiding? What secrets is Aiden hiding? And then it turns out, no, he just knows how far it is from here to there. Like, okay, whatever. I didn't care for that. And then, like I said, a lot of the members of the court that surrounded Sarene, I don't even remember a lot of their names. That's just how much I not dislike them, but that's how much I didn't care about them, if that makes sense. So yeah, characters, solid 6. Now the plot, I rated as a 5.9. This is the lowest thing I rated. I just didn't really care for the plot too much. Like, it was interesting enough for me to keep reading, obviously. Like, the whole thing where Elantris as a city fell, the magic was lost, now there's a new country built up, and then there's, like, these background politics. But it's a lot of the background politics stuff I didn't care for, personally. Like, you have the rival, like, the Fjordell, however you say that. Like, they're an empire, they just took over the east, and now they have their eyes set on this other country, these last 2 countries that resist their religion. like, I get it. You're trying to make it this big epic thing, but this is all in one book. And the city, in it, the title is Elantris, or Elantris, however you want to say it. So I was expecting it would focus more on Elantris in its surrounding environment, not how it fits in the entire world, if that makes sense. And there were some cool like world building moments, like surrounding the magic, things like that I really liked. But it's just the plot itself I didn't care for. Again, going back to that whole Aiden being good at numbers, and then it's revealed at the end he's really an Elantrian, but they hit it, and he knows the exact distance. Now that he's in full power, he can like talk normally. Like things like that are just kind of forced in there, in my opinion, and I just didn't care. Like, yeah, he kind of set it up earlier. He's muttering numbers at that first dinner when Sarene meets him, but I don't know. The payoff for me didn't work. And again, what really lowered the plot for me was focusing so much on Sarene and even Hrathen in like the politics. I don't really care too much about the politics. I'm more in kind of like the adventure of Raoden making the best of the city of Elantris that is just terrible, and trying to unlock the secrets and trying to make it a better place to live, and like never giving up, and in all these things. That to me is a much more intriguing story than all these background politics surrounding Elantris, but not directly. Like, yeah, that stuff I didn't care for. Now, dialogue and prose is the fourth category I like to rate. I rated that. It's a 6.6. So it's the highest thing I've rated so far. Spoiler alert, world building's been higher. And it's because Brandon Sanderson does do a good job where he makes it accessible for you to be able to understand what's going on. He doesn't really make it, like the prose isn't very hard to read and follow along with and understand. The reason it's not higher, because with that being said, is because the dialogue to me a lot of times is just kind of corny and cheesy. Sometimes. Although to be fair, there were a couple times I literally laughed out loud. I don't remember the exact point. So good job, Brandon. You sometimes are good with humor, even though I've heard very mixed things about his humor. And there are other things I'm like, okay, that's forced. I don't like that. And again, some of the dialogue, it's some exposition, trying to like, it's more telling, not showing some stuff like that I don't really care for. I'm a really big show, don't tell. But it really depends on the narrative. It really depends on accessibility, things like that. But I just feel like there was a lot of telling, not showing. That just doesn't jive with me very well. So yeah, could have been higher, could have been lower, but yeah, solid 6.6. Now the last thing, like I said, is the highest rated thing I rated is world building as a 7.2. Again, the magic system I really liked. It follows these aeons or ions. In like an Elantrian can just basically use their finger or even a stencil, whatever, and just write these different runes, sort of. They're not runes, but runic-esque things or shapes in the air. And then, like, based on what you draw and how many lines and squares and boxes, all these different things, it creates different effects, which I think is cool. Like, one of the first times where it's actually successful in the book for Raoden, it's like this big flash of flame. And of course, he's in the library, so he, like, torches an entire bookcase, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so, like, the magic system is really cool. But again, it's kind of cheesy a little bit with things like the transportation. So again, it has limits, which is good. But then Sanderson got around those limits by creating a character just for the sole fact of this is how many steps it is between here and there. Which, again, whatever. I've already harped on that enough. So that was really cool. And even just kind of the whole city itself being a conduit for the magic, I think is really cool. And how Raoden kind of figured that out, but you don't realize until the end when he just when he does it himself with dragging that stick to make a really big line, kind of mimicking that crack in the countryside, or the chasm, whatever it's called. That was really good. And even like the floating orbs, I think those are called aeons as well. I don't remember exactly. And like those being side characters and having their own personalities and things like that. That was fun. And like you can use them almost like for FaceTime. And like the aeon's face literally takes on the face of whoever you're talking to. Like when Sarene was talking to her king father, it would literally become his face, and it's like you got this orb right in front of you and you're just talking to your dad who's hundreds of miles away. Like that was cool. But yeah, and like kind of, yes, I understand it's a kingdom, you have different countries, and like understanding that there's different countries and how they interact a little bit was interesting. But again, the actual politicking itself, I didn't care for. It wasn't intriguing enough. But yeah, overall, I did really enjoy the magic system or the world building in general. So yeah, I clearly have mixed feelings about Elantris, but it's definitely a recommend. I definitely dig this book, but hesitantly, if that makes sense. So yeah, anyway, Elantris 6.44 out of 10. If you guys like this video, please hit like down below. Tell me in the comments below what your thoughts on Elantris are, or if I'm way off base, or if you agree with me. What are some different things you liked, you disliked, all those good things. And to be fair, I will say I do plan on continuing the Cosmere or following more of Brandon Sanderson. The next one I plan on reading is Mistborn, Era 1. So yeah. Yeah, if you want to see more from me, Diggerdan, please hit that subscribe button as well as that bell notification icon so you guys know when I upload each and every single time. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.